Hello and welcome back to Analysis. Today, the 3 months of emergency law and nighttime curfew which began during the violent crackdown on Mohamed Morsi's supporters in Egypt have come to an end. The state of emergency, which could not have been legally extended any further without a national referendum, has allowed the authorities to make arrests without warrants and search people's homes. It also made the sweeping security crackdown on the Muslim Brotherhood and affiliated organizations possible. However, the lifting of the state of emergency and the curfew comes 2 days after an amended protest law, which will still severely restrict the right of people to organize demonstrations. And this was submitted to the new president, and it worries many human rights observers. Also this week, there was a damning report by the Thomson Reuters Foundation, which claimed that Egypt is now the worst country for women's rights in the whole Arab world. So how seriously are human rights in Egypt under threat? Are any of these restrictions really necessary to maintain security in today's volatile situation? Well, joining me in the studio to discuss this are Mohamed Soudan, Foreign Relations Secretary for the Muslim Brotherhood's Freedom and Justice Party, Sameh el-Afty, Chairman of the Egyptian anti-coup coalition in Europe, and on Skype from Cairo, Diana el-Tahawy, who is a researcher at Amnesty International. Welcome to you all. Well, let's first have a look at some video.
Today, Egyptians will once again regain the night. After 3 months, the state of emergency on the country will be lifted, alongside nighttime curfews. The government measures were brought in response to the hundreds of deaths during the clearing of pro-Morsi camps in Cairo in August. Thousands of arrests of Islamist activists and pro-Morsi supporters have been made since the measures were brought in, sparking the suggestion that their function was to give security services additional powers. Using both the right to arrest and to search homes without a warrant is highly reminiscent of the 3 decades of emergency law under ousted President Hosni Mubarak. This comes on the same week that deposed President Mohamed Morsi publicly accused the army chief who overthrew him of treason. The former president has always maintained that his removal constituted a military coup. Despite the lifting of the powers, there is growing concern for human rights and freedom in Egypt. Stringent new limits on freedom of movement are soon to be introduced, regulating public protest.
As far as we are concerned, the new protest law is a failed attempt by the military to bring back the police state that we brought down on January 25th, 2011. And as I said, it is an attempt that will fail.
Human rights campaigners worry that this new law could move towards giving the police the power to ban protests outright, a clear regression to the authoritarian government under Mubarak. Women's rights in Egypt are also under the spotlight after a report by Thomson Reuters Foundation labelled Egypt the worst country in the Arab world to be a woman, based on increase of sexual harassment, female genital mutilation and violence. With the authorities already planning to increase the presence of security forces across the country, many see this as merely a smokescreen for a continued crackdown on the civil liberties Egyptians had hoped for. Tayana Simons, Islam Channel.
He said that if there weren't any emergency laws, this new military government wouldn't be able to retain control. So will it now be under threat because it's not using emergency laws?
Well, to be honest, the emergency law is being introduced in Egypt since '58. And if we look at it for the last 30 years of Mubarak, former dictator, it does not implement any peace, and it does not prevent any violence as well. We had too many accidents in Egypt, in Sharm el-Sheikh, in time of Mubarak. We had attack of tourists as well, and there was a time of emergency state law, and is not prevented and is not giving the peace they're looking for. And I think the military leader at the moment they use more than law effected against anyone against the coup. Some reports say more than 400 female students they've been arrested without any warrant, in the prison at the moment. There is thousands is being killed, and there's no such as a simple investigation is being
But isn't the lifting of the nighttime curfew a good thing? I mean,
that is not going to be very good for too many people. The only people they achieve out of this, some middle-class worker like drivers, taxi drivers, some business open at night. But we're talking about the protester and people against the coup, which will be no change at all, because they've been killing them in peaceful demonstration, and they will kill them as well in the peaceful demonstration. So lifting the state of emergency does not reflect in the real life in Egypt with people against the coup.
well, Diana el-Tahawy, what is your view? I mean, isn't it a good thing to have the emergency law lifted and the nighttime curfew lifted? Isn't it a step in the right direction?
Well, traditionally, emergency legislation has been used in Egypt to repress freedoms and to trample on rights, basically to remove safeguards against torture, against fair trial, to allow security forces sweeping powers to arrest people without having to resort to the Code of Criminal Procedure. I'm talking about the 30-year period under the rule of Hosni Mubarak. However, what we've seen in the past few months, so since the removal of Mohamed Morsi, is that while emergency legislation has been in place, the authorities have actually detained most people outside of that framework. Thousands of people were arrested in the framework of protests and have been brought in front of the regular courts, not exceptional courts. And also their basic rights have not been respected. So I would tend to agree that a lot of the violations that have been committed in the past few months are not directly linked to the state of the emergency, but the state of the emergency facilitates their commission.
Well, Mohamed, Sudan, I mean, do you think there will now be new protests by the Muslim Brotherhood as a result of the lifting of the state of emergency?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Let us say that Egypt will never be changed under the coup authority of this kind of junta. If there is emergency law, without emergency, it doesn't make any kind of difference. The Muslim Brotherhood with the alliance pro the legitimacy, now and the rest of the Egyptian people, I mean, who demonstrate since 120 days now. They doesn't care if there is emergency law or there is no emergency law, there is curfew or not, because they still demonstrate since the 120 days ago. Even there are times of the curfew, they are still in the street. They are being killed, they are being abused. A lot of women being behind bars, they doesn't care. Kids.
But are there still protests going on in the street?
Yeah, they
haven't stopped.
I believe that they were there for 120 days, and they still insist to be there till they get their dignity back, their legitimacy back. And then either there are emergency law or not, then doesn't make any difference with the people who are protest against this kind of coup.
Well, Sameh, el-Afty, you represent this anti-coup coalition in Europe. Is it possible to set up an anti-coup coalition in Egypt?
There is some a lot of organization in Egypt from too many movement, labor movement and democracy movement and Islamist as well. But the problem is, as we say, the military, the leader, they control Egypt in such way. For example, the trial of Dr. Mohamed Morsi, the judge himself, the district judge, he was ruling the hearing. He doesn't know where is Dr. Morsi is being held for all this time. And military, he try hard to avoid any such of appeal for solicitor to see all this detained in prisons. So I don't think so the lifting emergency law, he will help.
Yeah, but come to my question, if you wouldn't mind. I mean, is there any chance that non-Islamists, people who are not part of the Muslim Brotherhood, will also start protesting about the lack of human rights in Egypt, or are they quiet?
No, it will, and it has been as well. I mean, a lot of movement, as I said, labor movement, they've been in the street beside the Muslim Brotherhood and all Islamists, and everyone he was looking forward for processing of democracy in Egypt, which is we had 5 elections since the 25th January revolution, and it became, after the military coup now, is absolutely unbelievable. We will, they call Egyptian to start from the beginning, like 11 of February 2011. So I think a lot of movement in Egypt, not only Islamist, they against.
Now, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We have a Copt against the coup.
Copts against the coup.
Yes, we have a new movement. It's a Coptic, and then I think it's since 2 months ago now they are been existing. And no, the flag is not Islamist. The flag is democracy.
Yeah.
Now the democracy is been stealing from the Egyptian people, and everyone has dignity and wants to get his dignity and freedom and democracy back, which was in the era of Mohamed Morsi. It was, I think, a brilliant era. It was democracy, 100% democracy.
Well, let me come to Diana again. On this other issue, the question of women's rights, and the Thomson Reuters Foundation report saying that they're the worst in Egypt, anywhere in the Arab world. I mean, I think it's a surprise to most people. They tend to think the Gulf Arab countries, and particularly Saudi Arabia, are worse for women than Egypt. And this report says, no, it's not true. Can you explain, what the situation is, why Egypt is so bad, and whether it's getting worse?
Well, there certainly is a lot of discrimination against women in law and practice in Egypt, not only now, but this has been true for decades. I think one of the reasons Egypt has been highlighted negatively recently is because of the rise of sexual harassment and assaults on women in public places, including in the vicinity of protests by mobs of men in public, without security forces intervening to put an end to it, without security forces actually then prosecuting anyone responsible. So there is a sense in society that you can literally rape a woman in public and get away with it. But this is not a new problem. The first time women spoke out against this was during the rule of the then president Mohamed Morsi in November of 2012 during demonstrations against the constitutional declaration. It was repeated again, this wave of horrific attacks against women in public spaces in the second anniversary commemorating the 25 January revolution. At the time, officials denied the seriousness of the reports. In some cases, members of the parliament, the Shura Council, have actually placed the blame on women for what has happened to them by saying they shouldn't have been mixing with men. The prosecution has opened investigation in one of these cases brought forth by survivors, but the investigations have stalled and nobody has been punished for this. And this is why we see a repeat of the similar pattern of abuse against women, whose rights have always been marginalized regardless of who's in power, whether it's Hosni Mubarak, whether it's the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces, whether it's Mohamed Morsi, or whether it's the current authorities.
Well, I think the report, the Thomson report, says that actually the rise of sort of Islamist feelings in Egypt over the last 2 years has contributed to a bad effect on women's rights. Made things worse for women. Would you accept that?
I mean, I would say that discrimination and discriminatory attitudes against women were existent in Egyptian society before the one-year rule of Mohamed Morsi. It's these kinds of legislations basically discriminating against women when it comes to marriage, divorce, custody of children, the kind of legislation that doesn't protect women against sexual violence and assault, against domestic violence, the failure of governments to address the deeply entrenched attitudes against women have all contributed to this deteriorating situation. And certainly during the rule of Mohamed Morsi, the government has yet again failed to deliver on the promises made to give equal rights to women, to have them be represented in public life on par with men. And unfortunately, this is something that we see again today. Today, the government, which claims that it will have a better record than its predecessor when it comes to women's rights, has also only selected 5 women on a 50-member committee to draft the new constitution, again, marginalizing women.
Well, Sameh, I mean, what do you say to that Mohamed Morsi failed to do anything for women's rights, to improve them?
To be honest, I agree with your guest from Cairo. Is not a matter of revolution 25th or time of Dr. Mohamed Morsi. I think abuse of women is a long history in Egypt. Part of it in education-wise and how they brought up the kids at school and media as well. And don't forget the army, which is a lot of people, the laborers, unfortunately, they supported the army. He's the one first time, I think our guest from Cairo, she knows, they've been forced a virginity test on women in protest in March 2011. And this has come from the army, not from Dr. Mohamed Morsi. And women's rights in Egypt is being declared a lot of shifted the positive way, but not as what we're expecting as well after the revolution.
Yes, you say women's laws, there's laws about women's rights under Mohamed Morsi took place?
Is not much, because it's a short period of time to create new laws supporting women's rights in this short period of time. It will be very hard. But we're talking about 30 years of Mubarak as well. He was no one talk about women's rights in political life as every human in Egypt anyway, male or female, because it was no democracy in the time of Mubarak.
Well, Mohamed Sudan, what do you say to
actually for this? Because I believe that's when President Morsi started his power, and then he made the first law to the widow women in Egypt, and he gave them like entire payments.
For
he raised it. Yes, that was for the widow women, the women who lost their husbands.
Yes.
And he made them like in payments, monthly payments. Now they are very sad. Those women are very sad because they are lost this payment because the junta stopped it.
I see.
Yeah. And this is the first thing. The other thing is the constitution itself. A lot of things in the constitution is beside the women. Plus, she is a citizen. Then she take his right as a citizen in Egypt, and plus the more advantage in the constitution for the women. Then she get more than the man in Egypt as a rights. There are a lot of articles in the Constitution 2012 toward the women, give them more rights than she has more, because she is a citizen, a regular citizen, plus she is a woman. Then she has more rights, more than men in Egypt.
Well, Diana, do you agree with that, that the 2012 Constitution did actually give, at least on paper, more rights for women?
No, actually, the 2012 Constitution did not explicitly outlaw discrimination against women. And this is something that women's rights groups at the time were calling for. However, what I want to highlight, it's not just about having the right legislation, but it's also about the practice, about actually prosecuting such crimes, about having a comprehensive strategy to address discrimination and violence against women.
And you say there was no such strategy under Mubarak, under Morsi, or under Sisi?
Well, I mean, to date, this hasn't been adopted, and as women's rights groups have been calling for the adoption of such a strategy, including with the consultation of independent groups, so groups that have been working with women, including disadvantaged women and girls across the country.
If you compare the junta or the SCAF, where they're dealing with trading the protesters, the women protesters in Tahrir Square, and they arrest them, and they made the virgin test with them inside the camp of the military. And what happened now in Egypt? They arrest 22 girls, small girls in Alexandria, and then they are in jail right now. And more than 300 protesters, women protesters, also they've been arrested. That never happened before. Even in Mubarak time, That never happened. That they arrested women as a protester or something like this.
And these women protesters were Muslim Brotherhood women?
No, they're just a regular women. I never said that they belong to Muslim Brotherhood or Freedom or any movement Islamist. They are just regular protesters. They are walking in the rally or in the marshal against the coup in all of Egypt. That never happened before, even in the 30 years of Mubarak era. Never happened that they arrested women. Never happened that they come to home to arrest some person from the Muslim Brotherhood and they didn't found him, and then they go to arrest her daughter, for instance, or her wife. That never happened in Mubarak's era, which is the dictatorship era. Now it's happening in Sisi era.
Right.
In Sisi era, they arrest the daughter of Dr. Azab 3-4 weeks ago, Dr. Shawan. That happened now in Sisi era. Very, very discrimination and women abuse and very horrible.
Well, thank you. We're coming towards the end of the program. I wanted to change the subject to the sort of news development, which is that the Russian foreign minister has been meeting the Egyptian foreign minister. I mean, do you see any sign here that the Egyptians are moving away from their dependence on the United States, indeed trying to sort of highlight differences? And this is symbolic, or is there really going to be a real shift of policy?
I don't think so. It will be a real left. Is part of the game. Military leader they playing with international community, because not too many people they approve the coup in Egypt. And I think they hiring a private company for declare a lot of lie about what happened in Egypt at the moment after 4 years of the coup. And moving to Russia is part of a political game the military leader they play to first of all not suspend the aid coming from America, which is 1.5 billion a year to the army, and involving the army for too many business in Egypt. They don't want any interfere. So I think that moving to the Russia is just part of the political game they play in at the moment.
Well, would you agree with that, or do you think there is a wider shift that may be more long-term towards Russia?
No, I agree with this, because the main role player in this conspiracy of the coup in Egypt is the United States. This is what I believe in. And now just to let Russia to come in the game to play another role in it. I think that this kind of games from the West, especially from United States and Russia, against the democracy in Egypt, just to take a piece of cake, to work together. And I think also it's something related to the crisis in Syria. Here is both the United States and Russia is going to play another game in the region.
Right.
But I think this is some
connected to Syria.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for that point, and I'm afraid we have run out of time. So thank you very much, Diana el-Tahawy. Thank you, Mohamed Sudan, and thank you, Sameh el-Afty. And of course, thank you for watching.